Welcome to the Weekend Writing Podcast,
where writers read flash fiction.
Was humanity alone in the universe?
The patrol is here to keep the peace.
The royal astronomer of had located a small backwater planet called Earth.
I'm Sylvan Drake.
and I'm John Nedwill. Space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of... Who's interrupting my monologue?
It's not my fault. I think it's that interstellar communications app you downloaded. It's picking up some strange transmissions.
Really? I didn't think it was working. What did you do?
Nothing, it just started making those noises.
Well, keep doing whatever it is you aren't doing and see if you can tune it in.
All right, if I adjust this setting, then bingo.
Welcome to the mothership. Did you bring your towel?
That sounds like...
Great, you'll need it.
Jin from Ura.
Immersive experience.
But where's it coming from?
Purple alert.
You're not going to believe this, but it's coming from somewhere in orbit. I think it's the Ura mothership.
It sounds like she's downloaded herself into their mainframe.
Well, that's not all that's being downloaded. There's a file coming in. The header says it's stories for the 100th issue of Tevun-Krus.
Stories? Put them on the speaker, Lieutenant.
Do it yourself. I outrank you around here, remember? Ask the Universe by Craig Beckham.
Anne stood with her back to the ancient stones of Hadrian's Wall with naught but a trusty telescope and camera by her side. Her parents had gifted her the camera on her 16th birthday, so with the thing being 9 years old, it was no wonder why it wouldn't connect to her state-of-the-art telescope. Not that it would stop her from trying, of course. She was still unplugging cables in a frenzy, cursing and rapping the side of the camera when she heard someone approaching. Anne had forgotten she wasn't alone until her fellow friend and astronomer, Lily, came trudging back over the rough terrain, with a well-aged bottle of Shiraz in hand. "What?" Lily demanded. "It's not like we're underage. Plus you know as well as I do that there's no fun in stargazing without good wine." Anne chuckled. "I prefer to see my stars, but thanks." Lily persisted. "Don't get all judgmental on me. It's bloody freezing out there and we need something to warm us up." Anne shook her head this time. "We're in the north of England. It's always freezing. Anyway, you shouldn't have brought that here. Wine and history are not a good mix." Lily went to pick up the two glasses sitting at the top of her backpack, pointedly ignoring Anne. Then her jaw dropped as she watched them roll onto the patchy yellow grass. Lily sighed with relief when the glasses didn't shatter and then tried again, only this time she remembered to yank one of the wool mittens off her hand first. Of course, she had to shove Anne's glass in her face for her to get the hint. "You'd rather I drank alone?" Anne paused before sliding her camera back into its worn-looking case and bowed so low she almost toppled. "Oh, why not? I humbly accept this fine offering." She noticed Lily staring up into the starlit sky mid-pour and had to snatch the bottle and glass from her before the whole lot spilled. "What is it? What's wrong?" Lily pointed towards the southern skyline, and as Anne followed her gaze, she couldn't believe her eyes. Sirius A, the dog star, was already the brightest in the sky, much larger than its dying counterpart Sirius B, but now appeared ready to explode. It wasn't blinking blue and white as it did last time Anne had seen it. Now it was flashing through what seemed like every colour of the rainbow, again and again, each burst more chaotic looking than the last. "Ignore me, this is normal." Or rather, it was normal since everything we see of Sirius happened roughly 9 years ago. Man, time is weird. Still, the research doesn't lie. Lily seemed confident of that as she painstakingly scrolled through pages of data on a tablet. "Prove it," Anne snapped, reaching to see for herself. Lily pursed her lips, unimpressed. "Fine." She stubbed her finger against the glass screen. Sirius is known as the multicoloured twinkling star. Supposedly, its light refracts as it passes through a planet's atmosphere. Anne bit her lip, still not believing her friend. Hey, at least you were right about one thing. Wine and astronomy don't mix. That's not quite what I said about wine, and I don't care what the textbook says. That star's not twinkling. Come on, look at it. Anne pointed again. That's not normal, it can't be. Lily patted Anne on the shoulder. You're mistaken, it does happen sometimes though. Inwardly fuming, Anne bent her eye closer to the telescope lens, hoping to drown out her friend's voice. 1 second. Did you say something? Lily asked a few minutes later, her wine glass pressed to her face. Anne pulled away from the scope with difficulty, seemingly fighting the urge to keep looking. There are 4 1-second flashes of light followed by a pause, then another 1-second flash of light. Don't you see what this is? Lily puffed out her cheeks with the light of Anne's torch and the light in her face as if she was the villain in some bad movie. What am I not seeing? Anne pointed up again. It's Morse code with light. Lily snorted into her drink. You've got to be kidding. And who, pray do tell, could be signalling us from the great beyond? We're talking about a star, not some flashlight. Anne knew what she discovered. She also knew how ridiculous it sounded, but she couldn't ignore it. Pass me a tablet. Lily rolled her eyes. Why? Because I'm going to record a video using the telescope as a guide. She handed the device over without a fuss, but still shook her head. I admit, I thought it odd at first, but now I think we're wasting our time here. But we came to Hadrian's Wall to stargaze. We came because the entire class did, and I joined because I said it'd help you find a project for your dissertation. But I don't think this is it. Why not study Proxima Centauri or anything else? Anne sighed. Everything else is or has been studied to death, Lily. I need something different. This is it. Fair enough, she replied, walking back down the hill. Anne's heart sunk. You're not leaving, are you? Of course I'm not leaving. But we have to tell the professor that we need more time. Anne checked her watch, amazed that it had been hours since they'd arrived. Can you still see the others? I can barely see you, not to mention those damn wild sheep over there. Give me a minute. The astronomy professor and the other 4 students who'd come with them had seemingly moved further along Hadrian's Wall, but why they'd not said anything was a mystery, not to mention cruel. Anne didn't dare turn away from where she stood facing down the sloping hill. She was so scared that she found herself squinting at every shift in the shadows or rustle of nearby trees. Even the cattle were now silent, which was most unsettling. Lily, she whispered, hoping her friend might still somehow hear her. Nobody could hear her though. Anne was alone with only Lily's distant torchlight to keep her company. The star Sirius started flashing brighter than ever now, demanding Anne's attention. So she quickly connected the tablet and telescope before pressing the video record button. Okay, what is it you want to tell me, Sirius? What could be so important? Anne realised she was talking to herself this time, but didn't care. Sure enough, the pattern was repetitive. 4 1-second flashes of light would be 4 dots if Anne's memory served right. H, okay, keep them coming. A 1-second flash of light arrived next, following a pause. E, a 1-second flash of light that grew brighter than the rest came next, followed by a pause and a prolonged burst of light that lasted 3 seconds. Then came another, breaking the pattern, a 1-second flash and another before the same sequence repeated for the second time. Anne felt herself sweating now despite the cold breeze battering her skin. Inscribed the lettering. LL, it has to be. Her heart was hammering so hard she could hear every beat. Then came further rustling from somewhere behind, though much closer this time. Still, Anne didn't dare turn around. Instead, she focused on Sirius. A 3-second flash, another one, and another. What are you trying to tell me? No sooner had she yelled did the Morse code start over, leaving her to work through the lettering in her head, and she had to go over it several times to be sure she'd gotten it right. Hello? That can't be it. Anne's breath caught as she realised the implications. Her mind was racing. Hello? You're saying hello to me? Who's saying hello? Professor, Out the corner of her eye, Anne noticed to her dismay that the star Sirius had stopped blinking so erratically. The professor shook his head when he noticed the still full wine glass resting on the ground. Lily said you needed more time, but I think you've had enough already. 10 minutes, Anne. If you don't have your dissertation proposal in mind by then, you may never have it. Anne wanted to scream, and she very nearly did when she noticed that her video wasn't there. It recorded something, but the footage was black with no stars in sight. Yet as she went to take one last look at Sirius, she could have sworn that the star blinked again. Was humanity alone in the universe? Or were there other intelligent life forms out there after all? Perhaps they'd been patiently waiting for the right moment to say hello. Those questions would stay with Anne for years, but because of them, she'd never give up hope.
The Great Competition by Ethan Slaughter, also known as Wuxter on Wattpad. How much time do we have left? The Earl of Zebulon asked. His servant Winston pulled out the official hourglass and checked. Approximately 247 grains, sir. There ought to be time to nab a few more before the clock expires. What's our count at? 136 garden gnomes, sir, his other servant Francis said. Also, one plastic flamingo who's painted to look like he's wearing a gnome outfit. I'm not sure if that one's gonna count, sir. Hang on to it anyway. You know the Duke of Slisburg will lie, cheat, and steal in every possible way. We'll argue that it counts as a gnome all the way to the Supreme Council of Elders if we have to. Now keep your eyes peeled. There must be some more garden gnomes somewhere in this neighborhood. I see a yard with a plaster frog, sir, Francis said as he peered through a pair of binoculars. Grab it. We'll paint a beard on it and throw a funny hat on it. Nobody ever said gnomes can't be amphibians. How about you, Winston? You see anything promising? Oh, baby, Winston shouted. I think I just spotted the mother lode. 5 garden gnomes positioned as if they were having a meeting around a toadstool conference table. Where? The Earl of Zebulon said as he grabbed the binoculars out of Winston's hands. The strap pulled tight around his servant's neck, choking him as the Earl looked. I don't see what you're looking at. Where is it? Speak up, man. On a little island, Winston rasped as his face began to turn red. In the middle of the pond. The big white house at the end of the street. A large smile spread across the Earl of Zebulon's face. The crown shall be mine. When King Quig of the planet died a month ago, he had left no heirs behind. That meant the throne was up for grabs, and as dictated by tradition, would be claimed by the winner of the Great Competition. The royal astronomer of had located a small backwater planet called Earth, and noticed that it contained an unusually large amount of garden gnomes. When the royal game maker heard about this, she decreed that this year's great competition would be decided by whichever of the noblemen could steal the most garden gnomes from Earth in a 24-hour period. Thus, the heads of the 82 noble houses of had descended on the small blue planet roughly 23 and a half hours ago. Okay, Francis, you know the drill, right? Swim across the pond and retrieve the gnome, sir. That's right. Now try not to splash me with any water when you get in. I just got these robes dry cleaned. You got it, sir, Francis said as he leaped in the pond. He paddled with his 4 arms and 3 legs and was about halfway across when he let out a blood-curdling scream. Something large and vaguely orange-colored emerged from the depths and swallowed him whole. Oh no, the Earl said. Goldfish. The denizens of are a mighty warrior race that fear only one thing in all of existence, the apex predator known as the goldfish. Maybe we should just let these ones go, sir, Winston said. And risk letting that snotty Duke of Slisburg win? Over my dead body. I have a solution to our little predicament. Return to the flying saucer and fetch me my freeze ray. You shoved it in your pocket before we disembarked, sir. You said you didn't like the look on that earthling child's face, remember? Oh yes. Sure, she appeared to be merely having a tea party with her dolls, but I believe her intentions were much more insidious. Better safe than sorry. Nonetheless, I shall freeze the pond solid and you will walk across and get me my gnomes. He closed one eye and stuck the tip of his tongue out as he took careful aim with the freeze ray. Within seconds, the surface transformed into a sheet of ice. Winston carefully stepped out until all 3 of his feet were on the ice. Confident that it would support his weight, he began to walk forward. He barely had time to register the blur of orange color coming from underneath when the horrific monstrosity burst through the ice and grabbed him in its gaping jaws before disappearing back beneath the water. Realizing he was out of servants and nearly out of time, the Earl of Zebulon threw caution to the wind and raced across the ice. Hopefully, the dreaded goldfish was still busy consuming Winston and wouldn't come for him. He was nearly across when he heard the sound of ice cracking beneath his feet. In his haste to beat the incessantly trickling grains of sand, he hadn't done a very thorough job of freezing the pond. He was still several steps away from the island when he fell through the ice. In the course of his education, he'd learned to fence and ride horses and play lacrosse and everything it was deemed fit a nobleman should know, but he'd never learned to swim. As he thrashed around, one of the last things he saw was the Duke of Slisburg hanging onto a rope ladder as his minicopter descended on the island. The Duke flipped him the middle finger as he collected the precious gnomes, and then he heard the water splashing and sloshing all around him as 7 goldfish approached him from every direction. They each latched onto one of his limbs and then ripped him apart. Wanda Stevenson was completely unaware of the epic tragedy that had occurred in her pond the night before, so she couldn't understand why her normally ravenous goldfish seemed uninterested in their breakfast this morning. She also, for the life of her, couldn't figure out where the tiny little hourglass she found in the grass had come from.
The Lucky Ones by Berengaria de Rossi. Narrated by Sylvan Drake. Liberia, 2300 AD. The dead dog lay between us. The ridges of its ribs and hip bones cast small shadows in the ghostly blue light from the lunar lamp, making it look skinnier and more menacing than if it were alive. "You're going to do what?" Nolly asked, his voice cracking. "Eat it," Riabo said, calmly, "like our ancestors did." "That's disgusting and illegal," I said, my eyes flitting from the dog on the paving of the alleyway to my friend's face. "You're pulling our legs. You're not going to eat it." "Haven't you ever wanted to taste meat? The flesh of a real animal?" Riabo asked, as if asking us if we wanted to live in a mansion. "No," Nolly said, "not ever. Meat is dangerous. That's why it's illegal. And it's just stupid to eat it. You could die, and make other people die too." Riabo shook his head, clearly annoyed with us. "For thousands of years our ancestors thrived on meat. Hunting was what men did. Real men were hunters, not turnip merchants." He poked his finger accusingly at Nolly, whose own father ran a vegetable stand at the central marketplace. "Yes," I agreed, "and our ancestors had horrible diseases and suffered from epidemics. Ebola is real." Nolly shivered, and I understood why. Our national motto and the old posters could still be seen on public news screens and in the booths at hologram centers all over Monrovia. "Ebola is real. Plants are our future. Meat equals death. Plants equal life." In school, they showed us washed-out, jerky footage of the great epidemics of the 21st and 22nd centuries. We were taught in countless lessons that when science and industry advanced enough to make plant-based replacements available, and most importantly, affordable for all, meat was discarded for good. We had thrown off our shameful dependence on animals, just as our ancestors before had thrown off the brutal colonial masters who had enslaved us and ruled us from abroad. We should be proud of ourselves, we were told, and that we were incredibly lucky to live in the post-meat era. Liberians were now healthier than at any other time in our history. Why would anyone want to go back? From the end of the alleyway, the typical 5-note melody of a city bus chimed, alerting people at the next stop of its approach. I looked up and saw a soap advert written across the night sky in a bloody red before the ocean breeze dismantled it and blew it overland. We were alone. I gestured to the dead dog. "Where did you find it?" "I killed it," Riabo said proudly. "A real man should kill his dinner." "You killed someone's pet?" Nolly whispered in disbelief. "How did you know it wasn't sick? Maybe it had a disease," I asked, wanting to poke him a little with the fear both Nolly and I felt. Riabo snorted. "Stories for grandmothers. Meat isn't dangerous. That's all a lie. If it was sick, it would have died already. I'm a real man and—" "Ebola is real," Nolly cried, then glanced around and up at the tall, sleek, nanoplast buildings towering over us. I also hoped no one was peering out of one of the hundreds of balconies, their microbands filming the three of us huddled over the pitiful corpse and streaming it directly to the next police station. I looked at the scrawny dog, at its short fur and rat-like snout, and then at Riabo. "And how will you eat it? Just hack off a piece and start chewing?" "You think I don't know what I'm doing. Real meat is cooked over a real fire. I'm going to grill it, of course, he grinned, showing off rows of large white teeth. Nolly jolted to his feet. You're crazy, Ree, and I don't want to know you when you're infected. I will tell everyone I've never seen you before. He sprinted to the end of the alley where he stopped and called to me. Baruch, aren't you coming? I looked from one friend to the other and shook my head. I'll stay with the crazy boy. I wanted to see how far he'd go. Nolly stared angrily at me for a few seconds, but then disappeared around the corner. I fingered the metal bar I carried for protection whenever I ventured down to the harbor quarter. I felt safe enough. Riabo rummaged in the pockets of his trousers, finally pulling out a stolen laser light. From a niche, he took out a rust-spotted hubcap in which he'd already prepared some rags and such. He smiled again as the flames the burn setting produced took hold, looking almost as disturbing in the dancing light as the lifeless dog did. I watched as he set the laser light to cut and remove the dog's back haunch with a crack and a short jerk. Dark liquid seeped out of the gash. Riabo stripped the leg of skin, revealing the pale muscle and joints underneath. I felt my stomach turn. He placed the leg over the fire, setting it across 2 metal rods. Soon I smelt a strange odor like none I'd ever smelt before. I can't say it was unpleasant, but the thought of where it was coming from made me cover my mouth and nose with my hand. Even at that moment, I still didn't believe he would go through with it. I thought it was a bluff, that he was attempting to impress, like when the other boys jumped from the roofs of the floating hotels into the ocean, to the oohs and ahs of tourists. But he was not bluffing. Once the leg was sufficiently blackened, he bit into the hot flesh, ripping it away from the bone, chewing and chewing with those large white teeth. This is what life is, delicious. He took another bite, eyes closed in concentration. Or pleasure, it was difficult to determine which. I watched him eat most of the leg, disgusted and fascinated at turns. Then he leveled his gaze at me and held out the bone with the remaining meat clinging to it in ragged strips. Out of a type of morbid curiosity, I leaned forward and pinched off a bit, inspecting it before I put a tiny morsel cautiously into my mouth. It tasted awful, like burnt gloves. I spit it out when he wasn't looking. He consumed the rest of the dog himself. That was the first and the last time I ever tasted meat. Even later, during times when I was hungry and alone, I was never tempted to fall into barbaric ways. There were other more impressive methods to prove I was a man, to survive. Sometime later, Riabo was surprised by a patrol while he sat consuming a snake he'd killed along the side of the highway that stretches from the capital into the hinterland. They locked him away in a mental facility on the grounds that he was a danger to both himself and the entire nation. I testified before the magistrates at his trial that he was, and always had been. Ebola is real, and we are so very lucky to live in the post-meat era.
This is an excerpt from Dax McGraw, Peacekeeper Trombonist, by Guy Worthy. The patrol was here to keep the peace, and I was a peacekeeper, solo certified. We had a reliable rumor that Silvermouth and his gang planned to hit this drinking hole tonight. Now, don't get the idea that I'm brave or anything. The cats terrify me. They can and will rip each other to bloody shreds. Once in a while, one of us off-worlders gets themselves in the wrong place at the wrong time and ends up butchered. We're smaller and softer than the natives and slower as well, but I do not intend to let it get that far. I was armed with a trombone, and I was not afraid to use it. I spotted the back door to the club, locked tight. With smooth, professional grace, I shrugged my trombone case off my shoulders. The seals hissed as I released them. The brass of my Yamaha horn gleamed, reflecting distorted versions of the scattered light bulbs that dimly lit the alleyway. I screwed the slide to the main tubing and bell and ran the slide from first position to seventh position a few times. Too sticky. Dug around for my spray bottle and spritzed the slide with water. There, smooth as buttered grease. I wore a body amplifier that would reinforce my sound output, but I didn't slap it on. My trusty Yamaha was loud enough all by itself. I kicked the back door hard, several times. That ought to get somebody's attention. What should I play? A little Bach? What about Mozart? Nah, Bach should provide enough wattage for mere door opening. I blew some warm air into my horn, then commenced. Air on a G-string. Long, mellow, soulful notes echoed in the alley and seeped through the back door of the club. The door's little peep window slammed open. I kept playing, tamping down a surge of triumph to concentrate on breath support. Long notes required big lungs. Bolts slammed open and the door swung wide with the shadowy mass of a kuss looming on the threshold. Never does a kuss look more adorable than when under the influence of classical music. Their eyes open wide and their lenticular irises dilate. Their bewhiskered jowls droop and their furry ears rotate forward. The kuss's peculiar susceptibility to musical pacification had been noted shortly after the Federation made contact, when Kussian envoys entered Terran elevators and refused to exit due to their fascination with the background music. At any rate, when I stopped playing, the cat in the doorway slurred, "That was nice, little fella. Keep going." I polished my cup mouthpiece with a rag. "Actually, I'd like to speak with Big Ro, please." And then temptation overcome me, and I said in rush, "And maybe a blue fizz?" "Sure, little Terran buddy, come on in." The cat retreated into the club. I guessed female, and saw she was a tabby with orange-brown stripes and a tail that curled upward in a semicircle. Her perfumes tickled my nose, speaking an olfactory language beyond my ability to comprehend. She cast yellow-green eyes over her shoulder at me and continued, "Seen you around a time or two. With the patrol?" "Yes, I'm a peacekeeper." Crowd noise grew. We passed a kitchen doorway and traveled through a cloud of air scented of stew, scorpion spice, and marinade. Meat-loving Terrans rave about cuisine. I'm a vegetarian myself. "You nakey mice are so ugly, you're cute. And that music. Rrr." My guide parted a beaded curtain and ushered me through. The crowd noise crescendoed and the soft lighting revealed the main floor of the club, crowded with small tables and various arcade games. The tabbies steered me left, up a high step and into a private booth. And there she was, Big Ro. Her white fur grew at least a foot long in places. Sea foam eyes studiously ignored me. At least a dozen earrings marched down each ear, failing to disguise significant scarring. Another white scar angled across her pink nose. As her name implied, she bulked large for a kuss, and 2 additional bruisers flanked her chair. Unlike Boss Lady, the bodyguards stared at me like X-ray machines. "Lemur to see you, Big Ro," the tabby said. "Didn't catch its name. Wants a blue fizz." Big Ro's scarred nose wrinkled in distaste. "Cheated your way in, Lemur. All right, Foss. Get him a blue fizz." Foss the tabby whisked away, tail lashing. The term lemur referred to an Aryan lemur, a staple food source of the kuss, about 20 pounds large, native to the inner climate belt, the desert. I don't see the resemblance, but it's universal among the cats to call Terrans lemurs. As I and my Yamaha cooled it at the feet of the queen, Big Ro deigned to turn her stare upon me. She leaned forward. "So, spill. A peacekeeper doesn't just show up to be social."
Tales of the Post-Apocalypse. The Tower, by John Nedwill. We had just got across the border when the hover corvette lurched to one side and a cloud of foul-smelling smoke began to pour from under the hood. I turned to my lawyer and said, "We're in trouble." He fumbled with the rearview mirror. I was sure he was trying to get a glimpse of the burkas of the groupies we had rescued from the Texas Taliban, although I didn't want to think why. After all, what pleasures could a sentient plant from another dimension get from ogling forbidden mammalian flesh? He grinned at me. Nah, he said. We've lost them. We should be good from here on in. As if to underscore his wrong assessment of the situation, there was another eruption of gases from the motor. I had visions of being stranded in this Bob-forsaken wasteland, vultures picking at my desiccated flesh. Like hell we are! I screamed at him. I scanned the horizon, looking for any signs of civilization. Rising above the heat haze was a thin, black streak. I pointed towards it. Head for that, I said, gritting my teeth and trying to keep calm. Half an hour later, we had made it to what looked like a small slice of Middle Americana. It was as if some tornado had picked up a town, picket fences and all, and deposited it in the middle of the desert. There were clean sidewalks in front of whitewashed houses. Chromium-trimmed Detroit sharks were parked by celluloid flamingos. Faceless mannequins trimmed their burnt brown lawns, while their plastic wives brought them glasses of lemonade. At the centre of it all was a tower. I think we're in Kansas, I muttered. I don't like this, whispered my lawyer. This place is just too clean. It's like Celebration all over again. I pulled up at the side of the road and waved at one of the inhabitants. He strode over. Hi, neighbour. Need any help? His voice buzzed from a speaker in the middle of his otherwise blank face. Sure, I said. I got some car trouble. Is there a garage around here? The mannequin looked the car over, although for all I knew he was ogling our passengers. Sure, just down the road, he said, and gave us a set of directions that took us further into the town. By this point, my lawyer was curled up in his seat, moaning about cartoon rodents. I ignored him and pulled into the garage forecourt. The mechanic came out and popped the hood. That'll be expensive, pal. I gotta order the parts in. I shrugged. Sure, we ain't going nowhere. So, what's with the tower? The mechanic fumbled around in the engine. It's a nuclear device. Some say it's going to go off one day and fulfill our destiny. You worship a bomb? I asked him. Not really, the mechanic said. I'm not that devout. It's more Thanksgiving and Easter sort of thing for me.
Thank you for listening to the Weekend Write-In podcast, co-hosted and produced by John Nedwell and Sylvan Drake. For more episodes and links to our authors, go to www.weekendwritein.wordpress.com. Royalty-free music by fusslinestudios.com, BBC Sound Effect Archives, and freesound.org. Wow.
So there is intelligent life out there after all.
Intelligent-ish. And that's not all. There's a text message coming in. It looks like coordinates for something.
Coordinates, but that's...
In orbit, probably where the URA mothership is. I'll load them onto our teletransporter app.
Teletransporter app?
You're not the only one who has an App Store account around here. Right. Let's go.
Go where?
Where do you think?
Attention, attention. Initiation of another cryo-sleep cycle is imminent. Don't forget to turn off the lights. Happy dreams, and see you for the next issue of Tevun-Krus in a month.